Welcome to Cybersecurity HQ's Daily News Report. It's November 29th, 2024. We're diving straight into the most critical cybersecurity news, especially for professionals like you.
Straight to it then. Lots to cover today. Let's kick off with Operation Undercut, an AI-powered disinformation campaign. They're targeting Western support for Ukraine and even trying to influence the U.S. elections.
Operation Undercut. Sounds serious. Who's behind it?
The Social Design Agency, SDA, based in Moscow.
SDA? Weren't they sanctioned already?
They were. But that hasn't stopped them. They're using AI, generating deepfake videos, creating websites that look like legitimate news sources, all to sow discord, undermine trust in Ukraine, and they're even using the Israel-Gaza conflict to push their agenda.
So spreading misinformation. What's their main platform? I'm guessing social media.
Exactly. They've got a network of accounts, and they're really smart about using trending hashtags. It's about maximizing their reach. But think about this operation. It's a piece of a much bigger puzzle. This is part of Russia's cyber strategy, not just spreading misinformation. It's about weakening Western alliances, hitting at that support for Ukraine. Disinformation as a weapon, basically.
It's definitely unsettling. Let's move on. We've got this unique cyber attack. We're calling it the nearest neighbor attack. APT-28 is behind it.
APT-28, yeah, the Russian-backed hacking group, targeted a U.S. organization, but not directly. They went after a nearby organization's Wi-Fi first, like maybe a coffee shop or shared workspace, something like that. And then once they were in, they used that access to jump into their actual target's network.
So targeting a softer target first. Clever in a way, but pretty scary too.
What makes it even worse? They bypassed multi-factor authentication, MFA, all because the Wi-Fi security was so weak. Makes you wonder, how good is MFA if the very foundation it relies on is compromised?
Right. It all comes back to that weakest link. And speaking of weak links, there's this new Phishing as a Service toolkit, Rockstar 2FA.
Rockstar 2FA. Catchy name, dangerous tool. This one targets Microsoft 365 accounts, even the ones with MFA enabled. What makes it so dangerous? ATM techniques, adversary in the middle, they can intercept credentials and session cookies. MFA is basically useless against that.
I read somewhere that it's pretty cheap to get your hands on this toolkit, something like $200 for a 2-week subscription.
That's right, low price, high risk. And that's the scary part. Suddenly, a lot more cyber criminals can use this, and they're using really convincing phishing templates, mimicking Microsoft services perfectly. We're seeing links, QR codes, even document attachments. And get this, they're hosting these links on legitimate platforms. Google Docs Viewer, Microsoft OneDrive, hiding in plain sight.
Sneaky. Definitely something to watch out for. On a brighter note, Microsoft's been busy patching.
They've addressed 4 critical vulnerabilities. Their AI, cloud, and ERP services were affected. One of them, CVE 2024-49035, was already being exploited.
Good catch. Any other vulnerabilities we should be aware of?
The most severe one is CVE 2024-49038. A cross-site scripting vulnerability affects Copilot Studio. It's got a CVSS score of 9.3. And then there's an authentication flaw in Microsoft Azure Policy Watch. Critical functions weren't properly protected.
Yikes. Sounds like a busy time for sysadmins. Switching gears a bit, there are some phishing campaigns going around. They're spreading adware and fake apps.
They're disguising themselves as betting games, financial tools, things like that. They promise big returns, get people to deposit funds, and then disappear with the money. Some people have lost over $10,000.
And they're stealing data during the registration process too, right?
Double whammy.
Yeah.
So always be cautious of anything that seems too good to be true. All right, shifting gears again. This time it's about espionage. A U.S. citizen, Ping Li, 59 years old, sentenced to 4 years for spying. He was working for China's Ministry of State Security, the MSS.
Wow, that's serious. What's his story?
He worked at Verizon and Infosys, had access to some valuable information. Since 2012, he's been sharing sensitive data with MSS officers. We're talking about information on Chinese dissidents, Falun Gong members, even details about U.S.-based NGOs.
So basically a double agent.
Exactly. He even shared cybersecurity training materials and information about that 2021 SolarWinds attack. The damage is quite significant.
It's not the first time we've seen something like this, right? China and cyber espionage. There's Salt Typhoon, that state-sponsored group. They've been going after U.S. telecom companies.
It definitely raises concerns about their long-term strategy, their commitment to cyber espionage. As for Ping Li, he's got a $250,000 fine, and after his prison sentence, 3 years of supervised release. But the ripple effects of his actions, those are going to be felt for a long time.
No doubt. Let's lighten the mood a bit. I've been thinking a lot about the importance of cybersecurity, especially with all this rapid technological growth.
Andy Beal, the founder of Forta, he's been talking about that too. The bigger the technology gets, the bigger the attack surface. And with rapid growth, cybersecurity becomes even more critical. He uses Web3 as an example.
Web3, right? The next generation of the internet. Blockchain technology. It's fascinating, but still early days. Lots of security concerns, I imagine.
Absolutely. And that's where Forta comes in. They've developed Forta Firewall. It's an AI-powered firewall specifically for Web3. It secures transactions, prevents malicious actions, all within that Web3 environment.
So we're seeing those traditional cybersecurity concepts, firewalls, adapted for this new world.
What's interesting is Beal's take on it. He believes traditional tools are going to be crucial for securing Web3, a natural evolution, he calls it, learning from Web 2 and applying those lessons to this new frontier.
Makes sense. Now on to something a bit unsettling. There's a flaw with ThinkPad X230 laptop webcams.
Hackers can access the webcam without triggering the LED indicator, so someone could be watching you and you wouldn't even know it. A real privacy nightmare.
How did this vulnerability even come to light?
Andrei Konovlov, a cybersecurity researcher, found it. He was doing USB fuzzing experiments. Turns out the LED and the camera sensor power are controlled separately.
So even if the LED's off, the camera could still be recording. That's creepy.
And he didn't just find the flaw, he created a multi-stage exploit. He can execute arbitrary code on the webcam. Imagine what an attacker could do with that kind of control.
That's a big problem. What can be done about this?
Manufacturers need to step up their game, tie those LEDs directly to the camera power, implement secure firmware signature checks, rigorous firmware audits. It's all about building security into every layer.
Definitely. Okay, let's talk about China again. There's this report, the China Threat Snapshot. It highlights their espionage activities.
This report dives deep into the Chinese Communist Party's espionage, specifically against the U.S. They've been linked to over 224 incidents since 2000, mostly targeting economic and trade secrets.
So economic espionage is their main focus.
That's a big part of it. They had 55 espionage cases across 20 states just since 2021. And then there are the cyber campaigns targeting U.S. telecom infrastructure. And don't forget about the suppression of Chinese dissidents abroad. Their reach goes way beyond their borders.
Sounds like they're using both traditional espionage and cyber attacks.
That's right. They're using cooperative contacts, real people on the ground, along with cyber tools. It's a sophisticated approach.
That's a complex threat to counter. We need strong counterintelligence to address all those angles.
Absolutely. We can't just focus on the technology. We need to be aware of the human element as well. Now, let's circle back to Forta Firewall for a second.
The game changer in Web3 security, right?
It is. Think real-time transaction monitoring, threat prevention, all powered by AI. That's critical for a decentralized environment like Web3. What sets it apart is its proactiveness. It stops attacks before they can do any damage.
I remember Andy Beal saying, Web3 cybersecurity will echo Web2 solutions because the underlying technology builds on the internet. It makes sense. Learn from the past to secure the future.
Exactly. Now, let's shift our focus to Canada. They have this cybersecurity bill, Bill C-26, but it's facing some challenges. It was designed to strengthen their infrastructure against cyber attacks. A big part of it was banning partnerships with high-risk vendors like Huawei and ZTE.
I remember that. There were two main parts, amending the Telecommunications Act and enacting the Critical Cyber Systems Protection Act.
Right. The government wanted the power to stop telecom companies from using equipment from these risky vendors, especially Huawei and ZTE. This was all part of Ottawa's ban on Huawei's 5G equipment, all because of national security concerns.
Seems like a necessary step to protect their infrastructure. But there was some issue, right? A drafting error that could impact those cybersecurity protections.
Yeah, it's a bit complicated. Another law, Bill C-70, which focuses on foreign interference, unintentionally repealed some parts of Bill C-26. It happened during the legislative process. A tiny oversight, but it could have a big impact.
So bureaucratic issues could actually put their cybersecurity at risk. What happens now?
If they don't fix it quickly, it could delay those crucial cybersecurity measures, and that leaves Canada's infrastructure more vulnerable.
And this is happening at a time when Canadian banks and critical industries are reporting a surge in those high-impact cybersecurity breaches.
Exactly. They need these reforms. The financial sector is particularly concerned. They're the ones pushing for immediate action. They know that delays in cybersecurity legislation, it doesn't just affect them, it affects everyone, makes all those key sectors more vulnerable.
All right, let's talk about another cyber attack, a zero-click attack this time, exploiting two zero-day vulnerabilities. Some researchers think the Russian group Romcom is behind it.
Zero-click attacks, those are nasty. The victim doesn't have to do anything. In this case, they're exploiting a memory flaw in Mozilla Firefox, that's CVE 2024-9680, and a privilege escalation vulnerability in Windows, CVE 2024-49039.
So they're chaining them together to get into the system without the victim clicking anything.
Exactly. Fake websites redirect victims to malicious servers, triggering the exploit. They can install a backdoor, execute commands, download malware, all sorts of things. Really sophisticated stuff.
Have those vulnerabilities been fixed?
Fortunately, both Mozilla and Microsoft have patched them. Mozilla fixed Firefox on October 9th, and Microsoft addressed the Windows vulnerability in their November Patch Tuesday update. The problem is, many organizations are slow to patch, leaving them exposed.
A constant race against time. Let's move on. North Korean hackers, they've been stealing a lot of cryptocurrency, over $1 billion worth.
And they're doing it with social engineering, impersonating venture capitalists, recruiters, IT support, you name it, all to gain trust and access.
They're going all out. What's their usual approach?
Often they start with investment discussions. Then during online meetings, they create fake technical issues, redirecting the victim to their IT support team.
Which is actually them, and they install malware to steal the crypto, right?
You got it. One group, Sapphire Sleep, stole $10 million in just 6 months doing this.
It's a good reminder that social engineering is still a huge threat, even in the crypto world.
Absolutely. Organizations need to educate their employees about these tactics.
Back to Canada. There are concerns about the Huawei 5G ban. It seems major telecom companies haven't fully complied.
Rogers and Bell, they've minimized their use of Huawei equipment because of their partnerships with Ericsson and Nokia. But TELUS, we're not really sure where they stand. And with Bill C-26 being delayed, it's hard to enforce the ban effectively.
It's a tough situation. They've got to balance national security with staying competitive in the 5G race.
Finding that balance is a challenge for everyone, and the stakes just keep getting higher.
We're also seeing a resurgence in phishing attacks. This time, they're targeting Google and Microsoft users.
Yep, that Rockstar 2FA kit we talked about, it's being used against both platforms, stealing session cookies, bypassing two-factor authentication.
So even with 2FA, users are still vulnerable.
They are, and it's tricky because these phishing pages are hosted on trusted platforms. OneDrive, OneNote, Google Docs. It's hard to tell the real from the fake.
Speaking of new guidance, CISRO, the Canadian Insurance Services Regulatory Organizations, recently released updated guidelines.
These new guidelines focus on generative AI. They're encouraging businesses to rethink their cybersecurity strategies in light of AI.
AI is a powerful tool, but it can be a double-edged sword.
Exactly. The guidelines emphasize risk management, training, and a proactive cybersecurity culture. Organizations need to understand the challenges of AI and build safeguards to mitigate those risks.
So as technology changes, so do our security practices. Speaking of evolving threats, we're also seeing a rise in tech support scams targeting printer users.
These scams usually involve malicious Google ads. They redirect you to fake websites. Then they try to get you to download fake drivers or software. Could lead to all sorts of problems. Remote access theft, data breaches, you name it. They prey on people who are frustrated with tech issues.
So what can people do to protect themselves?
Be wary of sponsored ads. Stick to official websites and trusted forums for troubleshooting. If you're not sure, contact the manufacturer directly. Remember, real tech support will never contact you out of the blue.
Good advice. In other news, the OSCE held a workshop in Moldova, all about bolstering their cybersecurity.
It was focused on improving their national cyber incident classification system. They're trying to better address threats to their critical infrastructure, and they're working on their incident response frameworks. It's good to see countries taking steps to strengthen their defenses.
Cybersecurity is a global issue, and it requires global cooperation.
Exactly. That was a big theme of the workshop. They emphasized that international cooperation is key to addressing these cross-border cyber threats.
Let's talk about Telefonica. They've partnered with the Greater Miami Chamber of Commerce to enhance their cybersecurity.
It's a great partnership. The Chamber of Commerce is getting a whole suite of services: managed detection and response, MDR, digital forensics and incident response, DFIR, and digital risk protection, DRP.
So they're outsourcing their security to the experts.
Basically. And it makes sense for organizations that don't have the resources to build their own in-house security teams. Telefonica has global security operations centers that provide 247 threat monitoring and protection.
That's reassuring. Now let's switch gears to Japan. There's a new phishing scam going around, targeting corporate internet banking users.
This scam is pretty sneaky. The attackers pretend to be bank representatives and call their targets directly. They claim the victims' internet banking certificates have expired.
Creating a sense of urgency to make people panic.
Exactly. Then they send a phishing email with a link to a fake banking portal to steal their credentials.
And I bet the portal asked for everything: passwords, one-time passcodes, the whole 9 yards.
You got it. Once they have those credentials, they can access the accounts and transfer funds. And to make it even harder to track, they do it through multiple corporate entities.
That's a tough one to catch.
It shows how important cybersecurity awareness is. Even in a tech-savvy country like Japan, social engineering can still be effective. You always have to be on guard. It really does highlight the need for constant vigilance, you know? No matter how tech-savvy a country is, social engineering can still work. But let's shift gears a bit. There's been a major cyber attack hit the Wirral University Teaching Hospital, W Youth, part of the NHS Foundation Trust in the UK. They've had to declare a major incident.
Oh, wow. What happened?
Their IT systems are down, completely offline. They've had to postpone appointments, and they're relying on manual processes for now.
That's got to be incredibly disruptive.
It is. Emergency services are still running, but they're asking the public to only seek emergency care if it's, well, a genuine emergency. It really highlights the impact these attacks can have on essential services.
Do they know what caused it?
They're still investigating, but it looks like a ransomware attack. No one has claimed responsibility yet, but it wouldn't be surprising. Healthcare facilities are prime targets for ransomware. They rely on older systems and can't afford downtime. Makes them vulnerable.
Makes sense, unfortunately. Okay, let's talk about something else. There's been an incident that shows how fragile our internet infrastructure really is. 2 undersea cables in the Baltic Sea were cut last week, caused internet outages in the region.
Yeah, those cables connected Finland to Germany and Sweden to Lithuania, and they think it was deliberate.
Sabotage.
Potentially, which is a scary thought. Undersea cables, they carry almost all intercontinental data traffic. If they're damaged, it can have a huge impact on global communication.
Right, and I imagine those cables aren't easy to fix.
Exactly. It's a complex and time-consuming process. The investigation is ongoing, but there's been some focus on a Chinese vessel that was in the area as a geopolitical dimension to the whole thing.
It definitely raises a lot of questions. It also emphasizes the need for redundancy and resilience. We need to be prepared for these kinds of disruptions, whether they're accidental or intentional.
Absolutely. We rely on this infrastructure so much, but we often take it for granted. Okay, let's switch gears a bit and talk about security.txt files.
Those were recommended by the Internet Engineering Task Force a while back, right? As a standard for vulnerability disclosure.
Yeah, over 2 years ago, but they haven't really caught on. A security researcher, Ripa Martin, found that only 21 out of 500 Fortune companies are using them.
Why is that? It seems like a simple and effective way to improve security.
Some organizations are worried about something called big bounties.
Big bounties, what's that?
It's when researchers report minor issues or even things that aren't really vulnerabilities just to get a reward.
So they're trying to game the system.
Right. But I think the benefits of security.txt outweigh the risks. It gives researchers a clear way to report vulnerabilities responsibly, and it allows organizations to fix those issues before they become a problem.
Makes sense. Okay, let's move on to social media. There's a UNESCO report that's critical of influencers. Apparently, they're not doing a very good job of fact-checking.
Yeah, it's a bit concerning. They surveyed 500 influencers from 45 countries, and 2/3 of them admitted they don't fact-check the information they share.
That's a lot, especially when you consider how many followers these influencers have and how much influence they have, especially on young people.
It's a real problem. They're promoting critical thinking, but they're not practicing it themselves. We need better media literacy education, both for consumers and for content creators.
Absolutely. Now, on to a pretty serious data leak. 600,000 background checks were exposed.
It was SL Data Services, the company behind it. They run a bunch of websites that offer personal data, and they left a huge amount of data exposed. 713 GI of unencrypted records, names, addresses, phone numbers, criminal histories, everything.
That's a goldmine for identity thieves. How did this even happen?
Jeremiah Fowler, a cybersecurity researcher, discovered it. He's warning about the huge risk of identity theft and phishing attacks because of this.
It's a reminder that data security is critical, especially when we're talking about such sensitive personal information.
It's a huge responsibility, and it's clear that some companies aren't taking it seriously enough. Now, for a slightly lighter story, although it's still pretty serious, the Metropolitan Police in the UK accidentally revealed the identities of 18 victims. It was part of that Westminster honey trap scandal.
How did that happen?
A detective forgot to use BCC when sending an email update, so all the recipients could see each other's email addresses.
A simple mistake, but with potentially big consequences.
Exactly. The victims, which included MPs, journalists, and staffers, weren't happy about it. Scotland Yard apologized and referred the case to the Information Commissioner's office.
Another reminder that human error is a big factor in cybersecurity.
Absolutely. No matter how good your technical defenses are, human mistakes can always happen. Let's switch gears again and talk about sports. Bologna FC, the Italian football club, was hit by a ransomware attack.
Sports organizations seem to be increasingly targeted by cyber attacks. What happened in this case?
The hackers, a group called Ransom Hub, claim they stole 200 gigabytes of data, financial documents, player medical records, business plans, all sorts of sensitive information.
That's a lot of data, and it's valuable. It seems like cyber criminals are realizing that even sports clubs can be lucrative targets.
They are. Bologna FC hasn't said how they're handling the attack or whether they're planning to pay the ransom.
I'll have to wait and see. Okay, let's move on to another financial institution that's been targeted. Uganda's central bank was hacked. Reports say they could have lost millions of dollars.
Officials confirmed the breach, but they haven't said how much was actually stolen. Opposition leaders in Uganda are worried about the increasing number of attacks on banks in the country.
It highlights the global nature of cybercrime. Developing nations often don't have the resources to defend themselves against these sophisticated attacks.
That's right. And it underscores the need for international cooperation and capacity building. We need to work together to help countries strengthen their defenses.
Okay, let's end on a positive note. The United Nations has launched a new initiative. It's all about protecting submarine cables.
It's called the International Advisory Body for Submarine Cable Resilience. They're bringing together experts from all over the world to focus on the security of these critical communication links.
We've seen a number of incidents involving cable damage lately, like those in the Baltic Sea. What will this advisory body actually do?
Their main goal is to come up with strategies to protect cables from both accidents and attacks. They'll also work on improving coordination and information sharing between different stakeholders.
It's good to see that this is being taken seriously at an international level.
Absolutely. It's essential for ensuring the stability and resilience of our global communication networks.
All right, let's talk about espionage. 2 Bulgarians recently pleaded guilty in the UK. Turns out they were part of a Russian-directed spy ring.
Espionage might seem like something from the past, but it's still a real threat, and it's evolving with technology. This particular spy ring was using drones, hidden bugs, and Wi-Fi jammers to spy on military bases, dissidents, and journalists all over Europe.
What were they after?
They're still investigating their motives, but it was clearly a sophisticated operation with a lot of resources behind it. It shows that espionage is still happening, and it's using all the latest tech.
We definitely need to be vigilant.
The case is also interesting because it's linked to John Marsalek, the ex-COO of Wirecard. He disappeared, and there are rumors he's connected to Russian intelligence. Adds another layer to the whole thing.
Now, for a story that's got the cryptocurrency world talking, President-elect Donald Trump might be adding cryptocurrency to the U.S. Reserve Fund.
It's a big surprise considering he used to be skeptical of crypto. Some people think it's a smart move, embrace the technology and all its potential. Others aren't so sure.
He did just file a trademark for TruthFi. It's supposed to be a cryptocurrency payments platform.
Right, so maybe his stance is changing. It'll be interesting to see what he does. If he does add crypto to the reserve fund, it could have a huge impact on the market and regulations, could lead to more widespread adoption.
Time will tell. Let's switch gears and talk about a win against online piracy. Europol shut down a huge illegal IPTV network. They arrested 11 people.
This network was distributing over 2,500 pirated TV channels to 22 million viewers globally. They made an estimated 3 billion euros a year and caused 10 billion euros in damages to legitimate streaming services.
Those are massive numbers. It shows how big of a problem piracy is.
It really is. This operation involved law enforcement from all over Europe. International cooperation was key to taking down this network.
It's a good sign that they're taking this seriously. It sends a message to the pirates.
Definitely. Now let's talk about another big law enforcement effort, Operation HACHI. It was led by Interpol and focused on cybercrime syndicates. They arrested over 5,500 people and seized $400 million in assets.
That's impressive. What kinds of crimes were they targeting?
All sorts. Voice phishing, romance scams, sextortion, investment fraud, business email compromise. the works.
Those are some of the most common and most damaging types of cybercrime out there. What are the main findings of the operation?
Well, they identified over $1.1 billion in victim losses, and they found that some of these syndicates were using fake law enforcement IDs and encrypted messaging apps to carry out their schemes.
So they're getting more sophisticated. Makes it harder to catch them.
It does. We need to step up our game to stay ahead of them. International cooperation is key.
All right. The UK government has imposed some security conditions on a Chinese company that's acquiring Isotope X.
Isotope X.
Yeah, they're a UK-based mass spectrometer manufacturer.
Yeah.
This is all part of the UK's National Security and Investment Act. They're worried about national security risks. Sensitive technologies ending up in the wrong hands.
Right. Makes sense. So what are they doing about it?
The Chinese company has to appoint a chief security officer. They have to have UK security vetting clearance. That's UKSV. This officer will be in charge of all the sensitive data and infrastructure.
So they're trying to mitigate the risks.
Exactly. It's a delicate balance. They want to protect national security, but they also want to encourage foreign investment.
It's a challenge a lot of countries are facing.
Okay, one last story. Trellix just released a report. It's about the growing demand for AI-powered cybercrime tools.
It's not surprising. Cybercriminals always want the latest and greatest tech. AI can automate attacks, make them more efficient, and harder to detect.
It's like a cyber arms race. What's driving this demand?
The report says it's all the global tensions and conflicts that are happening, creates opportunities for cybercriminals and for hacktivists, too. Some are motivated by money, others by ideology.
It's a reminder that technology can be used for good or for evil.
Exactly. And it means we have to constantly adapt our cybersecurity strategies to keep up. We have to stay ahead of the curve.
Trellix also found that ransomware operators are using AI more and more.
Yeah, their data shows that Chinese groups like Mustang Panda are responsible for a lot of the advanced persistent threat activity. They're using AI to become even more sophisticated and to avoid traditional security measures.
That's worrying. Ransomware is already a huge problem.
And it's getting worse. There are all these smaller ransomware groups now, like Ransom Hub. They're responsible for more attacks than ever, even more than Lockbit in some cases. And they're incredibly agile, quick to adapt, tough to fight against.
So how are they using AI?
They're automating everything. Target selection, vulnerability scanning, encryption, you name it. And they're using tools like EDR Kill Shifter to disable endpoint detection and response systems. Makes it much harder for organizations to see the attack coming.
It sounds like they're always a step ahead.
Generative AI is changing everything. For the attackers and for the defenders, it's a constant race.
Okay, let's switch gears one last time. Capgemini has a new report out. It's about the link between cybersecurity and sustainability.
It's a really interesting topic. They're saying that integrating cybersecurity and sustainability can benefit both.
How so?
Well, think about cloud adoption. It improves security, but it also reduces carbon emissions. Gartner even predicts that by 2026, AI could reduce cybersecurity incidents by 40%. That's a big reduction.
It sounds promising, but I'm sure there are challenges.
There are. Outdated systems are a big problem. And then there's the issue of funding. And not everyone is aware of the benefits of combining cybersecurity and sustainability.
So what's the solution?
Capgemini says organizations should focus on cloud-based solutions and managed security services. Those are cost-effective and environmentally friendly ways to improve security.
It's a reminder that sustainability is important in every aspect of business, including cybersecurity.
It is. We need to think about the long-term impact of our choices.
It's definitely a shift in thinking, but an important one. We've covered a lot today, but it seems like there's always more cybersecurity news. It can be overwhelming trying to keep up with it all.
It can be. The threats are always evolving. But there are things we can do to stay ahead of the game.
Right, and that's where Cybersecurity HQ comes in. We're a community of cybersecurity professionals, over 70,000 strong, and we're here to help you navigate this complex landscape.
We have a job board, in-depth reports, a weekly newsletter, everything you need to stay informed and connected.
We're here to support you. So as we wrap up this deep dive, we'd like to leave you with something to think about.
A question to ponder.
We talked about how cybersecurity and sustainability are starting to merge, but what are the long-term implications of this convergence?
How will it shape the future of cybersecurity? How will it affect individuals and organizations?
It's a fascinating area to explore, and we encourage you to do just that.
Until next time, stay safe, stay secure.